I'm joined today by UFC welterweight contender Preston Parsons ahead of his next fight. That'll happen on January 13th. Well, he'll be taking on Bassil Hafez in search of his 11th professional win. Welcome, Preston, to the show once again, sir. It's a pleasure to speak with you, as always.
It's a pleasure to be back on.
I wanted to talk about the Trevin Giles fight. That, to me, was one of my favorite fights that I've seen as of late. That was an all-out war. I think that was more or less what you had expected going into that contest. But when you go back and watch it with a fresh set of eyes now, what are some of the things that go through your mind when you watch that fight?
I'm proud of that fight. I definitely left it all out there. I made a few tactical mistakes, giving up the top position when I shouldn't have, just searching for the finish the entire time. But I was proud of my performance that night. Obviously, I should have moved my head a little bit better, not get caught with so many jabs over and over again. I blew my nose in between rounds, did the Donald Cerrone. My face blew up pretty big. So it definitely looked worse than it actually was. Definitely was a lot of pressure and a headache, but it wasn't really as bad as it looked.
Preston, I thought you were ending this fight at the very first round. You got him. You had him what appeared to be locked in a choke. Can you tell me a little bit, like, what was it that you saw that made you go for that submission? Because I thought we were inches away from ending that fight in the first round.
One thing that I'm pretty good at timing is just coming over top of guys' jabs with the right hand. And I knew he was going to continue throwing the jabs, so I just timed one good one, and I felt him wobble. I felt him ready to get out of there, and he kind of just fell to the ground after that. And then I started looking for the choke. I think, again, another tactical mistake. I should have just created space and just tried to get the TKO or do a little bit more damage on the ground while I had him there. When you smell blood, you want to get the guy out of there. So that's kind of what happened. Is I knew I had him hurt with the right hand, so I smelled blood, and I was like, I wanted to get him out of there.
I was curious, like, when I look back at that fight, obviously your eye is a topic of conversation. Did that happen? Did you guys clash at the very beginning? Did you guys clash heads in the very beginning of the fight?
We may have. I'm not sure if that's exactly what made my eyes swell up as much as it did. The jabs definitely accumulated and started to cause the swelling, I think. And also, I was going into the fight, I had a runny nose, so I was blowing my nose all throughout the fight. Especially when you're in there, like, if there's any snot, I'm just blowing it out. So
Sure.
I was doing that a lot during the fight, and I think that contributed a lot to my eyes swelling up the way it did. But the headbutt may have added on to it, but I don't remember the headbutt really hurting.
Mm-hmm. And I brought that up because, it's a split decision, a really close fight. And do you think, like, your eye, the way that looked, maybe caused some of the judges to sway the way that they did?
I definitely think so. I talked to one of the judge that actually gave me the fight, Sal D'Amato. I talked to him on the shuttle on the way to the airport after the fight, and he said that he thought I won the fight. It's just that I gave up that top position for the last 90 seconds of the fight, and that kind of probably helped sway the judges a little bit more. Also, I looked a lot more beat up. My eye was a lot more swollen, even though, again, I was still fine. It looked worse than it was.
Well, you certainly have a lot to, like, hang your hat on. Like, Trevin Giles is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated fighters pound for pound in the entire organization. And you left it all out there. There's so much more about your game. Like, I think about the gauntlet that you have gone through. D-Rod, Giles, Evan Elder. He was undefeated when you fought him. Like, you're talking about a tenure of going through murderer's row. I know the results haven't always been there, but do you feel like there's, like, a lot more about your game that you haven't showcased yet?
Yes, I think so. I think I'm very well-rounded. I definitely think I'm one of the more well-rounded guys in the welterweight division. My striking is very good. My wrestling is good. My jiu-jitsu is good. And I always do best when I combined everything together. So I definitely have specialty coaches for stuff. Like, I started with a very good wrestling coach, but I do my best when I can add the ground and pound in with my wrestling, and then ground and pound in with the jiu-jitsu and stuff. And I can use my boxing to set up the takedowns. But I think this fight, I'm going to have a chance to really display my full skills, my full skill set. I'll be able to show some stand-up, show my grappling defense for once, since I'm normally the one going for the takedowns. Not many guys are shooting on me. So I definitely see this guy trying to just like all his other fights, I think he's going to try to get a hold of me at some point. And at some point, we will end up in a takedown position, and I'll know how to react.
Let's talk about your opponent, Bassil Hafez. He's a guy that I'm a little familiar with. I've seen him fight throughout CFFC. He fought JDM not that long ago. He ends up losing by split decision. I was a little surprised. He put on a valiant effort, but I thought JDM won the fight personally. No shade on him. I was just surprised that it went to a split decision. Were you also surprised? Did you have that one for JDM, or did you think Bassil won the fight?
I had it for JDM. I definitely agree with the split decision, though. It was a tough one to judge just because of the control time. Bassil wasn't doing too much with his takedowns. He was getting the guys down. He was keeping his hands locked, and he wasn't really doing very much damage. But he was controlling the top position for the majority of the fight. But other than that, he wasn't really showing very much. He was just trying to lock his hands around the guy, hold the guy down, keep the hands locked. So he wasn't really doing much damage.
Hey,
I know.
Go ahead.
So he took the fight on a short notice, so I know his gas tank probably is normally better, and he's probably not cutting that much weight whenever he has a full camp. So we're definitely preparing strength conditioning wise too to be in the best shape that I've ever been.
For Bassil and your skill sets, like obviously I think of you and I think of aggression, and I think of grappling, and you're a very, very technical fighter. Like I think of you and I just think of very technical fighting, not so much brawling, but just you fight smart, and I like that. When you think about how your skill sets stack up against Hafez, like what are some of the things that kind of go through your mind when you think about the contest in general?
I think he's very strong. I know he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He has very good grappling. I need to shut that down with my own. I definitely have good anti-grappling. I can keep the guys off me. I think that he's going to run into some of my shots as he really tries to pressure forward and take me down. But don't get me wrong, I'm definitely going to pressure him right away. I'm not going to sit back the entire time just because I know that he's a pressure fighter as well. So I definitely think this fight's going to, from the first bell, we're going to be getting after each other. But I know when he shoots his takedown, he's very, very one-dimensional. It seems like he has that good double leg, very strong double leg, and obviously it's working for him because he's been using it for his whole career as far as I've seen, and he's been using it pretty well. So we're definitely preparing to defend that double leg and any other chain grappling that he switches to. But it seems like for the most part, he gets on that double leg, he runs his feet, locks his hands, and finishes it power. A lot of muscle.
Well, Preston, I'm not going to ask you too much about your game plan because I want to watch the fight on January and I'll find out then. But what I will ask you is you beat this guy. That means 11 pro wins for you. And seemingly just kind of the welterweight division in general with the UFC, there's a lot of opportunity there. Like, where do you see your pathway to fighting a ranked guy?
I'm glad that I'm doing this fight at the beginning of the year. And knock on wood, I get out of there without breaking a hand like I did in the D-Rod fight and the Elder fight. So I'm not fighting but once a year like I have been. So I want to start this year off right, 2024, and then hopefully get another fight March, April, and then get another one, hopefully 4 fights next year. And I'm not going to ask for – I mean, I'd love to fight a ranked guy, but I just want to kind of prove, again, that I'm there and I'm winning these fights, and then hopefully by the end of the year have my name, a number next to not my name, top 15, and then hopefully fighting a top 10 guy.
I wanted to ask you a non-MMA question before I let you go. I noticed something during the fight. I noticed that you had a bicycle tattooed on your leg, and then you have a bicycle up in your garage somewhere, and I had to ask you, like, what's up with that? That's really unique, man.
So the one here hung on my wall is actually my grandpa brought it a long time ago, and it was hung at my mom's work for 30 years since I can remember. And then whenever they had to shut the office down, I told him I would take it and hang it on the wall. And it's kind of the reason I got it tattooed was kind of sentimental with me and my brother. As a kid, it just kind of has good nostalgia to it.
Well, yeah, I just thought that was super unique. I was like, wait a minute, is that like the same bike from the garage tattooed on his leg? If so, that's kind of cool. And I did want to bring it back to MMA. We got a big fight that's coming up in your division, Shavkat versus Wonderboy, and I'm just curious who you got in that fight.
I'm gonna go with Hamzat just because the grappling. I really like Wonderboy, and I he's definitely a tough fight always, because if he that's a hard one to predict, but I'm gonna have to go with the grappler. I'm gonna have to go with him because I think the cardio, and I think he'll get him down at some point, and I think that he'll be able to control him on the ground.
And then I'd be remiss to not ask you this one too. This one will also be happening soon. Ian Gary versus Vicente Luque. That's a big fight too. Who do you got in that one? I'm leaning Ian Gary, but I'm rooting for Vicente.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I'm rooting for Vicente, but I'm leaning towards Ian Gary. I think some of the hype behind him is real. He definitely has some skills. He has he's done well so far, and what he did to D-Rod was awesome. He's a great fighter, so I'm giving that one to Ian Gary. Although I would like for Luque to win.
Yeah, same. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I just asked Preston 2 different fights. That's how he has them going. Preston, before I let you go, I want to give you an opportunity. If there's anyone we need to thank before we put a bow on this, let's do it.
Thank my coaches, number 1, Cord Poe, my professor, Roberto Cortero, my training partners, my other fellow UFC fighters here from Jacksonville, Trey Waters, Stephen Coslow, Seth, Austin Lane, Ramon Tavares, my team, Elevate MMA, my training partners, Corey Taylor. Lots of guys I could call out. I think Corey was on with you recently, and he said he enjoyed the experience. So thank you again for having me.
I think Corey's just nice.
Yeah, he is. Sometimes. No, he has his moments.
Well, Preston, appreciate you pulling up. I wish you the best of skill in January, and I hope we do it again really soon.